And it's really recently that there has been this discrimination against Russian speakers, against Russian publications, against using Russian language in the schools.
Okay, Hassan.
And of course, that is part of
this might be just a torture video
raging in the last decade.
Well, with this caveat that the
Look at him, still blinking, looking away.
That's right. I think just the idea that anyone would say that Crimea is not
They're both fucking reptiles.
or the
I haven't heard anything
now
they've said.
calling for.
This is the U.S. intelligence agency, mind control.
What about for me?
Fighting has been reduced to artillery duels across hundreds of miles of front lines and creeping advances and retreats.
People watch
Ukraine,
this.
like Afghanistan, will bleed for a very long
This is awful.
Bro, they actually have some really good shit on this channel.
Militarists have waged permanent.
They have like I think it's where I got the interview where it's like they try to like basically it's Brzezinski. Do you know who that is?
Mm-hmm.
So he's the guy who basically armed the Mujahideen, kind of. But he's painted as the bloodthirsty guy who like gave him Stinger missiles and like caused al-qeada and all this stuff. Like they try to pin it on him. And so like they do an interview with them, and like Brzezinski straight up like owns this guy in the interview because he's asking about like, was it worth it to give him, I don't think it was this guy, but it was the network. They're asking him, was it worth it to give the Stingers? And he's like, yes. And he doesn't say stuff about like her damaging the Soviets. He's talking about how Afghans were dying, you know, and how it wasn't critical in winning the conflict, but it was quicker to bring it to an end. You know, it was in hastening the end of the conflict.
Sure.
And it was just funny. I was like, guys, you posted this? Like they really thought they were gonna go in there and he's just gonna be like some evil neocon motherfucker and not have like a strategy for talking to these people. It was a while ago, though.
Costing trillions of dollars over the past 2 decades have invested heavily in controlling the public narrative.
Oh, crapped in charisma.
The enemy, whether Saddam Hussein or Vladimir Putin, is always the epitome of evil, the new Hitler. Those we support are always heroic defenders of liberty and democracy. Anyone who questions the righteousness of the cause is accused of being an agent of foreign power and a traitor. The mass media cravenly disseminates these binary absurdities in 24-hour news cycles. Its news celebrities and experts, universally drawn from the intelligence community and the military, rarely deviate from the approved script. Day and night.
You're boring.
War never stop beating.
God, he's so boring.
To keep billions of dollars flowing into the hands of the war industry and prevent the public from asking inconvenient questions.
Million views.
Who, along with Nicholas Davies, authored War in Ukraine, making
fuck?
sense.
It would not stop giving me this video.
Place the war in Ukraine in its proper historical and cultural context, warning that a protracted war in Ukraine threatens open warfare between the United States and Russia.
No, it doesn't.
A nuclear Armageddon.
No, it doesn't.
Joining me to discuss her book.
Finally. Oh my God. I never have missed Hezbollah TV so much.
Warfare, Kingdom of the Unjust.
Oh, look, it's the CCP shill.
And Inside Iran. So in the book,
can we go back to those covers? I need to just graphic design is my passion. Like the first cover is so good.
Yeah. And awful.
It gets progressively worse, you know? I don't even know. Is this a title or is this like just like the pop art? Like, I don't know what I'm looking at. Where's the title? Is the title the side of the book? Is the title the front of the book on the pink one? And then Inside Iran? Okay, so like one font is going that way, one font is going down.
Also, the subtext is awful.
And even the guy who cut out this graphic cut it way too close to the S's and like, see that last section on the green book, your graphic is way too close. You're cutting even the shitty cover off. That is like, this is clearly, you can see the progress of them getting because looking into the drone war, you're going to find a lot of credible information and stuff. There's so much, right? So it started making her go a little crazy. This is the progression of psychosis that you're witnessing. Not like she designed them, but she had to approve them, I'm sure. So
yeah,
what she did design them.
The unjust behind the U.S.-Saudi connection and inside Iran. So in the book, Medea, you begin first by setting the Ukraine in historical context.
Oh my God!
And in particular,
so much,
the Russian-speaking regions. Just lay out for us.
He's overloading
because I think there is this kind of perception that
dude, he hasn't stopped blinking.
Ukraine or Russia's interest or claims.
What is happening?
I think people don't understand how close Ukraine and Russia have been.
Oh my God! Can we talk about
centuries? How many?
God, these
Russian
people are
speakers
awful.
Can we talk about everything that's going on in this shot right now? Like, this is obviously deliberate. You have clothes laid out on your bed, woman. Like, what's with that? Like, you look like this is like a teenager's bedroom. Is that Anne Frank on the wall? That's what I've been looking at. Is like what's on the wall and stuff like that. But that's definitely Anne Frank underneath the peace signs over there.
What the fuck?
And then it's like random ski photos. There's like a that's one of those headdresses that you'll see where they'll like have it at like dances in a lot of like Eastern Europe and upper Middle East stuff like that, upper Turkic.
She's an awful looking human being too. Just awful.
I bet you she's vegan too, right?
Probably. That's what these type of Karens do.
The connection between Ukraine and Russia has gone back and forth for a long time, but Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union.
So
crazy.
And places.
Would you believe it? Countries that are right next to each other have had a back and forth relationship for a long time.
Just imagine that can't possibly
okay,
be
we're
true.
gonna need. Look, we're either gonna need to turn this up or never put this on again. I mean, not turn it up, speed it up. Because this is my first time seeing this woman talking, and she might be even worse than the guy.
People in Russia have told me that the Americans might think of the state of Alaska.
Oh my God, the blinks on him are going to be speed run.
A part of their country for a long time. And it's really recently that there has been this discrimination against Russian speakers, against Russian publications, against using Russian language in the schools.
Okay, Hassan.
Of course, that is part of
this might be just a torture video
raging in the last decade.
Well, with this caveat that the
they didn't even still blinking. Looking away.
That's right. I think just the idea that anyone would say that Crimea is not.
They're both fucking reptiles.
Or the
I haven't heard anything
calling for all of Crimea to be taken back, and the way the U.S. media is portraying it as part of this fight right now is to get Crimea back into Russia. I think people should think of how it would feel if a hostile power in Canada, for example, decided that Alaska would no longer be part of the United States.
Oh my God.
That's what Russia did to Ukraine, though.
Yeah, that's literally what Russia did.
That would literally, if Canada seized Alaska, that would literally be the exact same thing as what Russia
exactly,
did.
100%.
Oh
and then
God.
If Canada completely invaded Alaska, that would be right now. That would be insane.
Let's talk a little bit about the antecedents
Let
to
him
the conflict
go.
that was in Eastern Europe in 1989.
He's sending messages.
trying to get this. I'm trying to find this.
By the way, one of the
help me.
The promises were made not to expand NATO beyond the border of a unified Germany. This is a historical fact.
Never happened.
Reported. And yet to even bring this up is an anathema among the media. So before we talk about what happened in 2014, let's talk a little bit about what happened between 1989 and 2014.
Oh boy.
No.
Well, in terms of the
okay,
NATO
skip to 2014.
Said,
we don't need to hear any of this. This is like, oh, we're gonna do blood and soil. How many years back to justify our invasion? Fuck off.
See that right after the Minsk agreements.
Nope.
Fuck off.
Of them was
I want to hear some Euromaidan denialism. That's what I need.
Dangerous.
Absolutely. When you
these neo-fascist elements because there's a strong fascist tradition in Ukraine going back to World War II. This was also true, of course, when I lived in Croatia with Ustasha. But explain that. And then after the fall of communism, you saw the resurrection of these fascistic or fascist-allied movements. They kind of sprouted back up out of the soil.
Well, that's right. And there were
Wonder
several
why.
different branches of them, and they also had their political party, which at one point in 2016, I think they got about 10% of the electorate, and then in the elections after that got a much smaller amount. And so people say, well, they're not important because they have no significant power when it comes to the elected government. But that's not where their power lies. Their power lies in the paramilitary groups and the armed
Okay,
elements.
go
and the ones
back.
who
We're a little
Dr.
too far.
Zelensky
I wasn't sure because this could predate
seen,
because you could go into
the
Euromaidan
National
from
Security
this
Archives
because
and other
they're there
groups get,
too.
2014, Victoria Nuland.
Yes.
I think the U.S. put what?
in the Donbass.
Well, we should be clear. When Zelensky ran, he made quite a fact of the fact that he brought up the fact that he was a Russian speaker, which was seen as an asset. Let's go back 2014, Victoria Nuland. I think the U.S. put what, $5 million. Explain what happened. Many
Wow, 5 million.
Bro,
Russians.
you know what's funny about that?
Man.
You know what's funny about that? It's even less than the one in Iran that they say is like responsible for Mossadegh.
That's funny.
Because wasn't it only like 6 million to Iran?
I have no idea.
It was like enough to buy like a few guns and ammunition for a few months. It was like nothing.
Yeah. Wow. $5 million. Man, you're really going to overthrow a country with $5 million. Damn. Watch out.
The point of doing these microcells this is not so much to overthrow the government. They don't think that's going to happen. It's to start making the government paranoid and stuff like that.
Right.
Half the time they might make sure these people get caught just to make the government paranoid.
In Ukraine argue this was a coup. And I think there's much validity of that, but explain.
It was no. It was a coup. It was a coup and revolution.
Politics of Ukraine, something the Soviet experts like George Kennan, even Burns, argued was dangerous.
It just wasn't a military coup.
The protest that broke out against an unpopular and corrupt government that was talking to both the Europeans about joining the European Union as well as joining an economic pact with Russia. There were segments of the population that rose up and said, we want to be pro-Western. We don't want these ties with Russia. And they started a peaceful protest. And that gathered steam and was overtaken by violent.
Why? See,
right
there
element.
It goes.
Now,
there it goes. The shift to the denialism, right? The way she's setting you up with rationality here is very interesting. So she's talking about the previous president, Alexander Litvinenko. Who also look at how he came to power, because it's also like sussy and like fascist takeover like stuff. It's very interesting if you want to look into his background. I don't know enough off the top of my head. I just remember reading it one time and going, oh, okay. But so she's saying the protest started as peaceful. They were emulating Occupy Wall Street, just like how the Arab Spring started emulating each other. Now, what happened is the police came in and started like beating people to death and repressing the protesters, right? And so like the nationalist elements went out and started standing up to the Russians and protecting and forming a militia to form a protection ring around the protesters. And that eventually brought in some Georgians that have been angry about Russia for a very long time, and that's normally like what the right sector ended up being made out of. You'd see a lot of Georgian guys in there.
Okay.
And they were one of the more prominent ones. You obviously have the like nationalist party like Svodka or something like that, Savoka or whatever. It's got the 3 fingers, that flag.
Yeah.
Like that was there, but largely like this is where those national defense brigades really started, was in response to police oppression and hatred for Russia.
Yeah.
And then they frame it, even when I was there, the media narrative, they're trying to frame it that some of the protesters are they're not pro EU or pro Russia. They want like a independent free state, which is that's actually what the narrative Russia was pushing for the Donbass rebels.
Interesting. Why?
it just helps paint them it just helps get the neo-Nazi thing going there.
Okay.
And like also like Russia sent foreign troops in and basically told them that these were neo-Nazi, all the protesters were neo-Nazi elements. They brought them in from an area of Ukraine that has a lot of Russian propaganda, and I think it was Crimea. I think it was a section of Crimea that had a lot of Russian propaganda.
It's very Nazi-esque of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been over this before. That was the whole point of bringing in foreign troops or foreign police. Yeah. I think they were technically police, more likely to shoot protesters.
Yeah.
There were talks going on between the Ukrainian leadership, the government in power, and the European countries to say, how can we come up with a solution to this? And they planned on having new elections. This was not good enough for those right-wing elements, and they decided that they were going to continue to escalate, and they took over the building in parliament. They forced
after what
the government in power out, and they started this violent actions in reaction to the breakaway republics in the Donbass. So Victoria Nuland,
are you serious, dude? She was like, oh, and then they got increasingly violent, like she's just equating, because this happened for months, like, so then she equates everything to just being like Euromaidan is only the like violent part. And I mean violent, like there was tons of like they were like beating police with clubs and shit like before this. There was like flails there. Like it was really interesting. The type, like a lot of like made maces and hammers and stuff, and then they all like made shields. and so they moved into the parliament and took it over by marching against the police, and 100 of them died. They only had a few guns among them, and they were like, you know, like some of them were shotguns too, you know, so they're just shooting slugs trying to hit these people. And bolt action rifles is like the best you can get there. So
not anymore.
Yeah, not anymore, of course. So they take over the building, and then she says this repression of the Donbass. She skips over the invasion of Crimea there, which Gherkin has said himself, who then goes to lead and wants to be a warlord in the Donbass and creates the situation in the Donbass, has said himself, Putin has said himself, there was never any support for Russia in both of these regions. It never existed. It was completely fabricated, and they don't care about being open and honest about it now because it doesn't matter anymore.
Gotta love that.
At the time, and she was directly involved in trying to engineer what would be the outcome of these protests, who would be in charge. It's quite astounding that we have that audio tape of her talking to the U.S. ambassador in Ukraine about how they were going to disregard, although she didn't use that nice word, she used another word, the European Union and the person that they wanted to put in power, and instead put in who the U.S. had wanted to put. We have a video that we did to accompany our book, Chris, in which we show her out in the Maidan giving out sweets to the protesters, but her role
watch out.
I missed who she's talking about, so.
Victoria Nuland.
Oh, okay. Acting United States Secretary of State at the time. Nope, Deputy Secretary of State. Sorry.
Oh. Watch out. She's giving out lollies. Gonna make a revolution.
She's 62. She's like a nice old lady who was giving protesters lollipops.
Okay, no.
Years to come, just as we've seen the National Security Archives and other groups get documents long after the fact about U.S. involvement in coups in other countries around the world. We have yet to see the extent of U.S. involvement. But
how
we know that
did the U.S. disclose those documents themselves, honey?
Documents.
Or are you talking about WikiLeaks? She's talking about WikiLeaks. Of course, she's not talking about freedom of information.
Promoting the protests and heavily involved in deciding who exactly would come to power.
I want to go back to the Azov Battalion and these neo-fascist elements.
Here's the thing.
There's a strong...
Even if the Americans were heavily involved deciding who comes to power, or could they have been more heavily involved than Russia at like any point in like Ukraine's history? Like Russia has been trying to like, come on. Like if by involvement they mean they helped keep Russia out of the elections and made sure they were free and fair, sure, guys.
Yeah, which is likely what it was.
Yes.
Fascist tradition in Ukraine going back to World War II. This was also true, of course, when I lived in Croatia with Ustasha. But explain that. And then after the fall of communism, you saw the resurrection of these
not relevant. Didn't
fascistic.
happen today. This conflict starts in 2014.
And I think I'm right when I say
it starts independently. All right. It doesn't matter about the deals, the government, or anything like that. This was started with 100 Ukrainians dying in the streets for their democracy. Okay. And since then, corruption has plummeted down, smuggling plummeting down, all these things. The progress Ukraine has made while technically under occupation since 2014, able to build a military that has taken, according to some, 50% of Russia's like value in their army out. It's going to take Russia like, decades to make up the like losses in some of the equipment they've had.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, just
they shouldn't have invaded.
You know what? Want to know why it's crazy, right? So this is what I say about Iran. That Iran, if you just get rid of the IRGC, there's a government and constitution underneath it all that can just exist, and you can just have like snap elections, and it would be completely fine. So Ukraine, obviously, it's a puppet state for Russia. So they have the masking of democracy and all this stuff underneath. They have the necessary structures to maintain a democratic state, but they weren't a democratic state. It was a fake, like corrupt face for Russia, right? So because those values exist, just think about like imagine it's like a score, like an index score. Like the democracy and freedom went up so significantly after that 2014 revolution that the country has been able to propel itself. Even with like the economy has been shit because of like Russia limiting like gas and resources and all this shit. And it's still been able to do that just because of how valuable democracy is. When all your people can build up your country instead of one authoritarian, shit happens.
Yeah, naturally.
Those who have joined the Azov battalion. Is that correct?
Well, that's right. And when we talk about all of the weapons that are going into their hands, let's remember that there have the CBS report.
They really have hit all the talking
points.
points.
Only 30% of the weapons that the U.S. is sending getting into the hands of the Ukrainian fighters, and that so many of them were on the black market. And imagine who is getting so many of those weapons. It's going to be right-wing extremists that have come in to Ukraine to take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, okay. Now let's just think about this, all right? So like, sure, this was a big deal when the Donbass conflict was going on. It's one of the main reasons that we weren't sending, like, as Trump would say, the tank busters. Right? That's the main reason for that. Now, at this point, have you seen what Ukraine is like? Can you imagine, like, being like, haha, we're going to infiltrate this thing and, we're going to be bad actors in this war behind enemy lines here. Like, come on. Come on.
It's so insane. None of their narratives make any sense if you actually put any sort of heat to it.
Well, that's the thing is that they don't update it, the rhetoric.
No.
Right? So, because they're just drawing on past programming they've already used on people. Because this was true at one point. We were actually limiting shit, and there was an issue with who it was getting to.
Yeah. Fucking 2014, but certainly the installation of an anti-Russian government. You also saw NATO become very heavily involved in Ukraine.
I'm going to design a program that just makes noises when he blinks.
NATO country. I wonder if you could discuss that.
Well, it's interesting that Zelensky himself, when he recently made his fast-track application for NATO, said as much. He said, we are a de facto member of NATO, and we'd like to be a de jure, i.e. a legal member of NATO. And when you look at how, starting in 2015, the U.S., the West, NATO poured in weapons and trainers and trained 10,000 Ukrainian troops every single year.
No.
When the Russians invaded and the Western
10,000 every single year? Wow.
Many people did
not
realize.
That sure is a lot of troops. How many?
So many.
Let me just see how many troops Ukraine has lost in the war since the full-scale invasion.
About 100,000 Ukrainian troops had already been trained and equipped by NATO. So,
wow! Imagine sourcing training from an exterior military force. Oh my god!
So this actually based stats, because guess what the stats are measuring from?
Go on.
April 6, 2014 to December 31st, 2021. 10,000 trained every year. Okay.
Yeah.
So this narrative that Ukraine is running out of people to fight. Well, the war has been going on for a while. Some of those people may have retired. A lot of them joined back in. How many total deaths? This includes civilians in total. Even this is including even the Donbass forces too.
I haven't seen the number for ages. I wouldn't even know.
14,000.
That's it?
Yep. So only technically, according to her metric, only a year and a half of that U.S. training that was only happening at the 2015 Donbass breakout with the limited training. Now, this is like the invasion here. Ukrainian forces killed. Okay, they've lost, and since the full-scale war lost, they've lost 70,000, so 7 years worth of troops, but 100,000 wounded.
What's Russia lost?
They have 60,000 plus. 32,000 of that is confirmed by name. 210,000 plus wounded.
Fucking hell.
Wagner lost 22,000.
Good.
40,000 wounded.
Good.
Go ahead.
Certainly, there was a lot of preparation that led up to the kind of resistance that we're seeing today. And the fact that the U.S. is using its intelligence to help the Ukrainians with their targets. So it's weapons, it's training, it's intelligence.
Oh,
I mean, how much more do you
no.
need to say that the U.S. is involved and that NATO is involved in this war? It's kind of a charade to say that we don't have troops on the ground, so this is not a proxy war, this is not a direct involvement. But you have a lot of CIA agents on the ground, you have trainers, and I think very much
CIA
for,
doesn't have
Russia,
agents.
it is definitely.
I mean, technically, an agent is
less
somebody
data.
who they are using for intelligence. Anything is an agent.
But CIA people are not agents. It's
Yeah,
the assets.
they're officers.
Mm-hmm.
Why such staggering sums of money, over $50 billion? The State Department budget is, I think, about $60 billion, or the request for 2023. I mean, it is just a eye-popping sum of money, and the spigot's been turned on. There's kind of no end in sight. Can you talk about the cost of the war to the U.S. taxpayer?
Well, it is absolutely staggering, Chris, and I think the U.S. taxpayer has no inkling that this is happening. On the one hand, you have the justification for increasing the Pentagon budget itself now to over $800
Yeah, the
billion.
U.S. taxpayer,
There's
known
been a
for not
peace dividend now
complaining
that
about
the
the
U.S. is no
war.
longer in Afghanistan, but the war in Ukraine was used to justify this tremendous increase in the Pentagon budget. But the Ukraine money, including the military.
Oh yeah, that's never happened before, and they don't come up with an excuse every single time. No. It's just this specific time. Now it's an issue.
Yep.
Okay.
Budget for Ukraine is separate from the Pentagon budget, so it's on top of that. And yes, we saw that astounding vote for $40 billion. I mean, we can all imagine all kinds of things that we could be doing in this country with $40 billion. And there was not a peep from a Democrat when that vote happened. More recently, there's been another $13 billion, and the year isn't even over yet. You compare this to the budget of the State Department.
I'm going to start
I've
writing.
heard many
I'm going to start writing books.
Movement, particularly in other countries, comparing it to what they see as the existential crisis.
It's the ultimate grift, isn't it?
You just that's all you need is you need a book on something, and then boom. As soon as you write a book on something and it's distributed, then you get press tours. And like any local morning show is going to have you on to promote your book. You know,
you can spout any shit. Nobody's going to pull you up on it.
Yeah, people just think if it's in a book, it's like a good source. It's crazy.
Yeah.
The amount of people who value books as like the end all source is wild to me. Especially being somebody who uses like a lot of documentation with like photographic videos, audio, like I'm seeing looking at firsthand like files, documents, all that stuff being generated on the spot doing the research.
And this is just some idiot's words
that
you're taking as gospel. It's fucking insane.
And saying that there was this global climate fund that was supposed to be funded a decade ago for $100 billion. They never got more than $10 billion. And if you count all the money that all the Western countries and the U.S. have put into Ukraine, it's about $100 billion right now.
Wow.
So yes, these are astounding sums of money. The spigot is still on, and we are having a hard time even getting progressive Democrats to start questioning this. You might remember that Senator Rand Paul did question the money and saying there is no setup for any accountability of how this money is going to be used.
Not known for always whining and crying about
his own
money.
Party, as well as the Democrats saying, "Oh, come on, don't rain on our parade." And the Democrats and Republican leadership have been falling over themselves to say it's not enough money. We have to increase it. And meanwhile, the American public, when it comes to the elections, their greatest concern is around inflation. And yet the mainstream media has not made the connection between this war in Ukraine, the inflation that the American people are facing, and who is responsible for this in the White House and in the Congress.
Well, I think the head of NATO, head of the IMF have all warned of social unrest this winter as fuel prices skyrocket. Saudi Arabia, which you know well, is just proven which side they're on. But the feeling is we have to endure the cost. I can't remember who quoted in the book. Somebody said the less the price of liberty and freedom. But there's a kind of blindness to the social cost of what's happening.
His eyes are dry.
Yes, absolutely. I feel that the entire world is being affected by this war in so many different ways. One is by the difficulties of getting the grain out from both Ukraine and Russia, and the fertilizers from Russia that have affected
the global hunger crisis. Inflation is the voters' number one concern?
Something like that, yeah.
That was the phrase. So she definitely is drawing from the poll I'm looking at right now.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, the reason why she thinks that it's the most concern is because it's at the top of the graph. Okay. As you can see, it ranges in the 30s. That's economic problems, right? And then the top one is economy in general, then inflation, right? So it is like one of the top concerns in this sector. Because it's just, it's economy in general and inflation. But it's not like it's either inflation or economy in general. Those are two different answers being said.
Yes.
So then these ones, it's giving you the totals like in the 70s. The government poor leadership has greater values than these ones up here. It's just not true. It's funny that immigration is number 2 of the concerns too.
Yeah.
But it's only 10%, even though it's number 2. Abortion is crazy low, but I don't know. This might be an older poll.
Maybe
2022. It's probably similar. No, it's this year. The abortion is way too low. That's sad. Okay. Anyway, proved that wrong. We also learned that she can't read polls. Because somehow I definitely pulled up the same one she did just because of how it was oriented. All right.
We have the issue of the climate, where this war and the sanctions on Russia has actually led to the use of more dirty energy, whether it's more exploration for oil and gas.
I can't wait until the world is collapsing and all these agents are blaming America for it, for the pollution, not China.
Yeah.
It's going to be all pinned on America. It's going to be so funny.
Even though it's all China at this point.
Yeah, we can start preparing our rhetoric to counter it now.
We totally could.
Of nuclear plants, it's been disastrous for the environment, and the increase in military.
Did she include nuclear plants in dirty energy? Is she retarded?
Yes.
Nuclear energy is the cleanest possible.
No, I was saying yes.
Source.
I don't know if she said that. I just was saying yes to her being retarded.
And have increased food prices everywhere. We have the issue of the climate, where this war and the sanctions on Russia has actually led to the use of more dirty energy, whether it's more exploration for oil and gas, more use of coal, the stopping the decommissioning of nuclear plants. It's been disastrous for the environment. And the increase in militarization, we talked about the increased budget in the United States, but this is happening in all of the NATO countries. It's happening in Russia. It's happening in China.
I can't imagine why. It's like a retard echo chamber.
As well, because it's money that should be used for other causes. It strengthens the hardliners in all of our countries. It strengthens NATO. So there are so many negative effects of this war. And that's why I think it's so important that we, the public, get involved, get the kind of information we really need to see how our government has actually been thwarting efforts at negotiations, how the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, refuses to talk.
Look, you're hitting all the CCP talking points.
Biden refuses to talk.
Hitting all the woo mouth favorites.
How this is just leading us into an endless crisis that could lead to nuclear war, and even if it doesn't lead to nuclear war, has all these other consequences that I just mentioned that are disastrous for the world.
When you go back on CGTN, you fucking shill cunt.
She's not. Is she from CGTN?
No, she's just on it all the fucking time.